Hi, my name is Tanisha Kaiser and welcome to my True Crime YouTube channel. I just want to thank everybody that watched my last video. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. If you haven't watched it, maybe go give it a look. You might like it. Maybe a little like, a little subscribe, maybe a comment. That would be great. I'd love that. If not, that's fine. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And let's get into it. I'm very excited about today's story. We're talking about Margaret Rheeder, the woman who talked herself to death. Margaret was born in 1922 on the 6th of September in a small town called Platbos, which is near Knysna. Margaret had 6 siblings, right? But after her father passed away, Margaret's mother, she goes on with her life, with her 6 kids, including Margaret. She meets a man named Cornelius Shea. They get married, living life, and then they have 5 more children. So in total, they had 12 kids. 12. That's madness. I'm sorry, that's crazy, no? That's crazy. Like my grandma, she had 9 kids, if I'm counting everyone. But it's still a lot, but I guess it was normal for that time. So yes, 12 kids in the house. So in total, wait, is it 12? Because it's, no, she had 6 siblings. Oh my word, I can't count. She had 6 siblings, which means including her, it's 7. Then plus the 5, so 12. So it is 12. Yes, it is. There were 12. Oh my word. I can't do maths. That's so embarrassing. So in total, there are actually 14 in the house. Oh my word. So as you can imagine, they lived in extreme poverty. And what made things worse is that Cornelius Shea was a sickly man, which means that oftentimes he couldn't even go to work, which means they would often go hungry. At one point, they were only receiving a monthly grant of about 8 South African pounds at that time from the Department of Social Welfare, which isn't a lot. And I mean, for a family of 14 people, they were barely surviving. In 1934, Cornelius Shea sadly passed away. After Cornelius passes away, Margaret and her 2 sisters, Gwen and Olga, were sent to live in an orphanage in George. Here they learned how to do domestic work, so like housekeeping. And when Margaret turned 16, she got her first job as a servant in Paarl. After 5 years of working there, she moved to Wynberg for a short while. After this, she moved back to Knysna, where she started working as a housekeeper for a local hotel, right? She'd been all over. She'd been housekeeping, servant, gathering her skills. She's working at a hotel in Knysna. Let's go, Margaret, let's go. Margaret is 21 years old at this point. She's working in the hotel, and she meets a man, and they get married. Whoops, whoops, quick, married. They did not give this man's name. This is a very old story, so unfortunately there was only like one source. So this is all the information that I have that I'm giving you right now. I'm not purposely leaving anything out. It's just that there's limited information on old stories, because remember, this is starting in 1922 when Margaret was born, So okay, cool. They get married and they have 2 children. But unfortunately, this is not a very happy marriage. This man is always getting into trouble with the police. They didn't say what he was doing though. I was like, why was he getting in trouble with the police? What was he doing? Was it drugs? Was it alcohol? But they didn't say what this man was getting into trouble for, just that he's always in trouble with the police. But Margaret has a plan. Margaret does not sit at home for nobody. When Margaret's husband was away, she would play. She would strike up friendships with other men and openly boast about her conquests. Conquests, that's the word they used. Not me, that's not my word. Openly boast about her conquests. Like, she was like, it's fine. You go get into your trouble. It's fine. I'll make some new friends. Love. So after some time, she was just like, you know what? No. She divorces him while he's in prison. Don't know what for, don't know why he's there, but he's in prison. She divorces him. She's over it. She's like, no, I can do better. In 1951, so she's divorced her husband. It's 1951. Margaret is 21. No, she's 29 years old. Sorry, she's 29 years old, and she's got 2 children. And she needs to find a way to support herself. So she does that through sex work. It was at this age, she's 29 years old. She's supporting herself and her kids through sex work. And one day, she's on the train platform at Great Brak station, and she meets a man named Benjamin Rheeder. And in my research, it said that the 2 of them had a lot in common. That being, they both had 2 children, and they had both been in unhappy marriages. That's it. That's all they had in common. Like, maybe people just didn't have hobbies in the 50s or something. But like today, imagine just needing to have 2 things in common and be like, OMG, oh my gosh, let's just be the best of friends. I can't imagine it. But anyway, it was a different time, and it was enough for them to build a friendship. So they are friends, they're hanging out, maybe not like hanging out, I don't know what they did then, go for coffee, I don't know. But their friendship grows, and eventually Margaret offers to keep house for him, like to do domestic work around the house. He accepted, and she moved into his house in Port Elizabeth. I'm assuming the kids went with, but they don't say anything about the kids, but I'm assuming her and her kids moved in. Not long after Margaret's moved in, the friendship between the 2 deepened, and on the 6th of September in 1952, the couple got married on Margaret's 30th birthday. So her birthday is on the 6th of September, and this is 1952, and the 2 of them are now married. This is great for Margaret. Benjamin had a stable job as a checker at the Port Elizabeth docks. So this was the first time in Margaret's life that she had ever experienced financial security. She was happy, and everything seemed like it was perfect and idyllic, and just everything that she's actually needed in her life up until this point, you know? And that's what it seemed like. That's what it seemed like. Financial stability just wasn't cutting it for Margaret. It wasn't enough. The couple, like, they started arguing, right? She became extremely critical of his kids. She didn't like them, you know? She was like, not my kids though. She became critical of his drinking habits, like he's drinking too much, and then she started accusing him of flirting with other women. Now you think all of this is just happening in-house, like it's just between the 2 of them. No, Margaret is blabbing. She's blabbing. She's telling her sister. She goes to Gwen. Gwen is now maybe down the street. She goes to Gwen. She tells Gwen, I don't love him, Gwen. I never did. I only married him out of pity. I would like to give him a slow death. I just wonder, as her sister, Gwen, no, I'm Gwen, and I'm hearing this. Like, how did he act? Or maybe she just thought, like, okay, this woman's not being serious. She's just frustrated with her husband. Like, we all kind of want to kill our husbands, you know? Like, can't leave him because no money, no job, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe, you know? But I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, did Gwen not maybe think, like, this lady's a bit of a problem, you know? Then she tells Gwen her next husband will be someone that she really loved. And she says, not the old licked off bones that she was used to. Old licked off bones. I don't even know what that means. Do you know, I went looking to see, because I thought, okay, maybe this is like an Afrikaans thing, like, oh, afgelikte bene. And in context, in that context, then it's like that useless, tasteless nothing, you know? Oh, afgelikte bene, old licked off bones. Like, Margaret, this is a human. And your husband. Like, she did not like this man anymore. She hated him. In October 1955, Margaret's prayers were answered when her and her husband took in a lodger. So a lodger is someone that like rents a room in your house. This was a 22-year-old Johannes Strydom who worked as a railway worker. The man's youth and vigor was exactly what Margaret yearned for. So Johannes, 22-year-old Johannes, moves into the house, and while Margaret's husband goes to work, Margaret took to visiting him in his room. After some time, Margaret becomes infatuated with Johannes, and she starts confiding in him. She told him that she desperately wanted to get rid of her husband. She told him, I even smeared rat poison on his sandwiches, Johan, but Ben said they smelled funny and threw them away. You just met this man, Margaret. And he's 22. Okay. Johan so innocently asked, but why don't you just separate from him? Why do you have to kill him? She said, because I would have to leave with nothing. And I couldn't bear see him with another woman. Selfish, greedy Margaret. Am I painting the picture? Am I painting a good picture of this woman? Like, she's so selfish because she could leave him. She could get I don't know if she could get a job at this point in time, but anyway, she's selfish and she's greedy, Margaret. Marge, like, and then she's so stupid. She's telling this young boy basically what her plan is, and that she really tried to poison her husband. Margaret. By the end of summer, around March in 1957, Margaret had become openly hostile towards Benjamin, and she stopped sleeping with him because of his carrying ons. And I remember these carrying ons, which she described, was now the drinking, the having 2 children, I guess. Or maybe it's because like they were dependent on her and he's like out drinking and flirting with other women. But we don't know because, like I said, there's not much information on this case, and it's basically just one source that I got all of this from. So clearly what he was doing was enough to piss Margaret off enough to say, I'm done. And one day, Margaret decides she'd had enough. She's like, I am so done with this Benjamin Rheeder man. She marches down to the pharmacy in Kempston Road, 3 kilometers away from her house. And she buys a bottle of Antexit ant poison. The owner of the pharmacy, Mr. Roadhouse, warned Margaret that the insecticide contained arsenic, which was a very dangerous poison, and that this should be kept away from children and pets. Margaret thanked him, said she would be very careful, signed the poisons registry, and made her way home. That next Monday, Benjamin falls violently ill at work. That's the Monday. So he falls violently ill at work on the Monday. The next day, he's still feeling really unwell, and he pays the railway doctor, Dr. Edmund Bloch, a visit. And he's complaining of aches and pains and muscle pains. The doctor diagnoses him with fibrosis, which, to put it very simply, is muscle pain. And he prescribes him some medication. That same night, Benjamin began to retch and gag and heave, and he suffered excruciating pain in his legs. He went to Dr. Bloch again that same evening, and he gave him an injection to alleviate the pain. Dr. Bloch asked him to visit the next day. But the next day, Margaret gives Dr. Bloch a call and says that Benjamin has greatly improved but won't be well enough to make the appointment. Okay. So Dr. Bloch is like, okay, great news. Benjamin should just keep taking his medication and they should let him know of his progress. The next day, Dr. Bloch visits Benjamin, and Benjamin's complaining of vague pains and general nausea, but nothing serious. So Dr. Bloch is expecting Benjamin to be up and about in just a few days. Benjamin is going to be just fine, guys. 5 days later, Dr. Bloch is called to the Rheeder residence again. By this time, Benjamin had deteriorated considerably. His tongue was white and thick. He was experiencing continuous diarrhea and vomiting, and he was also struggling to breathe. To Dr. Bloch, these weren't life-threatening symptoms, and he just suggested that Benjamin go to the hospital for observation, either that evening or the morning, depending on if there was a bed available. And if that wasn't possible, then he would send a specialist to come and check up on Benjamin at the house. Now I know, you're wondering, where's Margaret? Where's Margaret? What's Margaret doing in all this? Margaret is unbothered. Margaret instead is going to her neighbor, Mrs. Fourie. They could recall Margaret talking about the insurance money that she's gonna get when Benjamin dies. But Dr. Bloch said that Benjamin is gonna be fine. He's just experiencing some light symptoms, like he's gonna be fine. And Margaret is talking about insurance money. Margaret. They also recall seeing her in her kitchen. She's ironing calmly. And in the background, Benjamin is screaming in pain. And she's calmly just ironing. Like, I can imagine that. I can imagine seeing her in the kitchen, just standing there with the iron, ironing the clothes while her husband is screaming in pain. She's like, that's what you get. Crazy. So back to the day that Dr. Bloch came to visit. This is the 7th of May, 1957. Margaret's brother, Kenneth Parker, comes to visit sick Benjamin. You know, he's being a good brother-in-law, coming to check on his sick brother-in-law. That's right. Anyway, he comes over, checks on Benji. He's sitting in the room with him, and around 10 o'clock, Margaret spoon feeds him a darkish liquid, which Kenneth assumes is medicine from a cup. Soon after he consumed this dark liquid, Benjamin begins to writhe in agony, and he's screaming about the hellish fires that are consuming him. Like, this man is in so much pain. And Margaret, while her husband is suffering next to her, says, he's just putting it on. The next day, the 8th of May, 1957, Benjamin Rheeder sadly passed away. Dr. Bloch was called out to the house and he signed the death certificate. And according to Dr. Bloch, Benjamin's death was caused by heart failure due to gastroenteritis. I don't know if I say that right, but basically, to put it extremely, extremely plainly is a stomach flu. He died from stomach flu, or stomach flu that caused heart failure. That's what the cause of death was, natural causes. So our babe Margaret, was getting away with this. Margaret decided to keep Benjamin's body for 2.5 days, despite the body rapidly decomposing, to avoid a post-mortem being done on his body. She also started insinuating a lot of things. She claimed that the injection that Dr. Bloch had given him had hastened his death. It was a deadly injection. He had put the knife to Benjamin because he was trying to weed out the nationalists. She was grasping at straws at this point, which was completely unnecessary because his death was already ruled as natural. And she kept going. She repeated these accusations to her brother-in-law. And when someone suggested she has a post-mortem done on the body, she said, "I don't need proof." Then shut up. Like, at this point, if she had just kept quiet, she could have gotten away with this. But no, not much. On another occasion, she claimed that when Dr. Bloch was busy writing the death certificate, he asked her, "What shall we write?" Which is so bold. It's so bold and so unnecessary. Like, all of these things just make it sound like she's desperate to cover something up, or like there's more to it. Because if you are really suspicious of the circumstances under which someone passed, then you would want to investigate it, especially if it's your beloved husband, right? And you're so concerned about this doctor. And if you're that concerned, you would want to investigate it. So she's just drawing more attention to herself. She's stupid. She's stupid. Next thing you know, people are talking. Rumors are flying. And eventually, this lands on the ears of Detective Constable Beatrice Rheeder. So him and Benjamin, they have the same surname, but they're not related. But this is enough to pique the detective's interest. He starts investigating a little bit. He does a few inquiries, and he starts questioning a few people. One of those people being Johannes Strydom, Margaret's lover. The lover. Johannes Strydom. The man she confided in about wanting to murder her husband. After the questioning, this led to an official investigation being launched just 10 days after Benjamin was buried. During the investigation, the police gave Margaret a call. They asked her, "Marge, do you have any poisons in the house?" I'm assuming she said no. She's like, no poisons here. The police went and they did a search of the house, and they found some tablets, which they sent off to be examined, but then it turns out that the tablets were harmless. Okay, so no poison in the house. The next step was for the police to visit pharmacies in the area. And then they came across the name Margaret Rheeder in the poisons registry at Kempston Road Pharmacy, just down the road from Margaret's house. On the 11th of June, about a month after Benjamin was buried, his body was exhumed. And they sent sections of his intestine to be examined, and they found traces of arsenic in his kidneys, liver, nails, and hair. The evidence indicated that a large dose of arsenic was administered at 10 p.m. the night of his death. That dark liquid. Margaret! On the 7th of August in 1957, Margaret Rheeder was arrested for the murder of her husband, Benjamin Rheeder. The trial began on the 2nd of November 1957, and it only lasted 8 days. Like, they were sure. They were like, who else could it be? Attorney L.C. Barron, I couldn't get his full name, but Attorney L.C. Barron was the state prosecutor. So he's against Margaret's team, legal defense, right? Margaret pleaded not guilty, even though there was a mountain of evidence against her. She vehemently denied these allegations. At one point during the trial, Margaret implied that her own brother Kenneth had the opportunity to kill Benjamin. The Attorney General pressed. He asked, "Then are you saying the brother is your poisoner?" Margaret answered, "No, I won't say that. I will not bear false testimony." The Attorney General asked, "Then was it one of your children?" "No," she answered. "Then did your husband commit suicide?" "No, the evidence does not support that idea," she said. The Attorney General then stated, "Then, if it wasn't you or any other person in the house, who was it that gave him the fatal dose?" Margaret paused. And said, "I don't know." The trial was concluded on the 11th of November 1957. Margaret was found guilty of murdering her husband, Benjamin Rheeder. The foreman of the jury the foreman of the jury is the person that speaks for the jury. So back then we still had a jury. In South Africa we don't anymore. So the foreman of the jury requested that the courts have mercy on Margaret because she suffered a hell of a life. The judge, however, didn't consider her circumstances that serious, and he asked Margaret, "Do you have anything to say?" Margaret was sobbing hysterically, and she said, "My heart is too sore. I want to go to my 2 little children." The judge then read, "The sentence of the court is that you be taken to a place of custody and be hanged by your neck until you are dead. May the Lord have mercy on your soul." The next thing Margaret said is in Afrikaans, okay, but I will translate. She says, "Iemand moet kom sê wie die skuldige is. O Here Jesus, ek is nie skuldig nie." Which basically means someone has to come confess what they did and that she's not guilty. She's like, "Oh dear Jesus, I am not guilty," basically, is what she said. But it's like, all the evidence points to you, Margaret, so enough with the dramatics, babe. Down to the gallows we go. She collapsed. So she says this whole thing, "Iemand moet kom sê wie die skuldige is. O Here Jesus, ek is nie skuldig nie." And then she collapses, and they have to help her from the court. Margaret maintained her innocence until the very last day of her life, but as she was taken from the cell to the gallows, like that sounds just like death. As she was taken from the cell to the gallows on the 6th of May in 1958, she confessed. She said, "I cannot go to my death with a lie on my lips. Yes, I did give Ben the poison. The last dose was at noon in a glass of water that he asked me to give him." But this wasn't true. This wasn't true. This wasn't true. This was Margaret's last attempt to get back at her old lover, Johan Strydom. She knew that Johan was at home at 12 in the afternoon, at noon. She knew he was at home at noon. But we know that the evidence shows that the last dose was given at 10 p.m. So the only person who could have given him the dose was Margaret. And she'd already said that she cannot bear false testimony, saying that Kenneth, her brother, who was there when she gave the final dose, she already said it's not him, basically. So in her last act of bitterness before her death, she tried to get back at Johann because he had ended the affair months prior. This girl, lady, woman, girl, she was still a girl. She was a woman. I mean, she's like 30. 32, 33, who knows? Can you believe that? I was like, you, even in death, you are still trying to get back at a lover. Girl. Luckily for Johannes, this evidence that the last dose was given at 10 exonerated him, and he was never charged with anything. And after she had given her confession, she was hung. And Margaret Rheeder died. So let's just discuss a little bit. I feel like Margaret could have, first of all, I'm glad she was caught. Let me just start with that. I'm glad she was caught. She was a bad woman doing a bad thing, and it didn't seem like her husband was really that bad. But then again, like I said, there's not a lot of information on the story, so it could be that her husband was abusive, or you know, abuse is a different situation. It's very difficult to leave. But in this situation, it didn't, well, there's no evidence that she was being abused by him, just that she was critical of the kids. He was drinking up a storm, and he was flirting with women, according to her. Just the way that she was acting, and the way that she was so callous about, like, telling people that she's gonna murder her husband and she wants to give him a slow death, and then having a lover in the same house. Like, she was so careless, and she was so silly. Even while he was ill, like, at least look distressed, right? Margaret was just a greedy, selfish woman. And guys, that is the case of Margaret Rheeder, the woman who talked herself to death. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the presence. I appreciate the views. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and give me a like. I would really appreciate it. If you enjoy true crime, I would say subscribe, because I upload these videos weekly. If you have any comments or criticisms or anything that you want to say even about the story, please comment down below. Thank you for being here with me. Have the best week, and just like laugh and love, and just enjoy it, and like the world is your oyster, and just like have the best time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.